My mother used to call me bluish, like black and Jewish.
We identify as kindred.
I identify very strongly with not being gendered.
Straight, white, male.
Taiwanese American woman.
Somebody who likes to read and write.
African American.
Native American.
American Muslim.
Brother.
Tomboy.
Transgender.
Gay.
Spirit.
Latina. Capoeirista, dancer, singer.
East Coaster.
American Muslim Pakistani.
Gardener.
Parent.
Mom.
We identify as one. We identify as many.
As much as we construct an identity, it's only as much of a thing that we have control over when people agree with that.
I was a cocktail waitress and I worked on Fisherman's Wharf, and Med would place bets on my ethnic background. I would tell them what I was and they would say, no, you are not that. And then I would say, well, yes, I am. I'm a member of the Upper Mattapanai tribe of the Powhatan Nation. They had an assumption about me and it never fit what they thought I was. I think when somebody asks you the question, what are you? You can stop and say, what are you? It's a question that when put back on somebody, then I think it makes them stop and think.
I have no control how others perceive me. I can manipulate my aesthetic to calibrate against the audience, to change how they might perceive me. And so, for example, if I'm talking to somebody who comes from a very particular kind of waspy background, I can calibrate my aesthetic, the way I speak, the things I talk about, to appear well-cultured to them, like a Renaissance person. I can change languages, I can do a variety of things. There's a cost to doing that. As women of color, as black women, we get small in front of white people, for example, because we know it's going to make them more comfortable, but the cost is that we're making ourselves small. But the way I control it is I am intentional about my actions. I evaluate the choices I'm making and the cost or the benefit of those choices. And ultimately, I think as long as I feel like I am controlling my own narrative, I am being perceived and viewed the way that's important to me, no matter the outcome, and that I get to define myself, then that's where the power or sort of the healthy side of that equation stays with me.
So I don't play basketball at all. It's not as though I didn't play it as a kid, but I know from my experience in high school, people identify me as that black guy who's then gonna, play basketball. So being out on the playground, oh, let's pick him for our team, right? And for me, part of it was like, I'm just not gonna be that. Partially because I wasn't all that interested in playing basketball, but I also didn't want to be reduced to a caricature or a stereotype.
None of us are one thing in total. We're sort of slices of identity.
Growing up with a Jamaican father, Choctaw and Southern black mama, I had the opportunity to experience fluidity as a bicultural person.
I am my parents' struggle when they came here from Pakistan. I am my grandparents when they had to go from India to Pakistan, during the partition. I am the Simpsons episodes that I grew up on.
That informed me and gave me a lot of my direction around conversations that happened later on in life when it was explained to me that I am Negroid, when it was explained to me that I am cisgendered female, when it was explained to me that I come from a certain SES, in terms of my family's financial status as I was growing up. And I decided that none of that actually was true.
At some point, you just kind of stop caring what other people think, because in the end, I have to live with myself, and I don't want to pretend to be somebody I'm not, because if I pretend to be somebody I'm not, then there's nobody out there who's going to pretend to be me, and I don't want to miss out on that.
I identify myself as Native American and Latina. I have a son by a sperm donor, and I sought a sperm donor that was ethnically similar to myself, which there is very little sperm of color out there, by the way, that you can purchase. And he turned out to be very white looking. And I remember when he was born, and I thought, oh my God, he's so white. And I thought I really wanted him to be darker. And I thought, thank God he's not darker. He's gonna have such an easier time of it in his life. And that both saddens me and also makes it easier for me to to talk to him about racial issues.
I identify as a straight white male. I identify as a parent and as a Jewish person, a brother, and as a member of my community. When somebody's gender aligns with the sex they're assigned at birth, and from the day literally they are born, maybe even from the days before, they are reaffirmed in that, they walk in the world with a certain level of certainty. When someone's gender doesn't necessarily line up as everyone expected it to, and then are questioned continuously about that, they walk without that same degree of privilege and freedom.
I identify very strongly with not being gendered, so I'm transgender and genderqueer. I visited my parents in South Florida. Nobody got my gender right. Even my parents, who I really put quite a bit of pressure on to ask them to at least try, and my brother also just sort of refuses. So I got misgendered for 9 days, and that sucks. It's really hard to hold together your sense of self when nobody else is mirroring back at you who you are.
I'm a project manager at a healthcare company in the Bay Area in California. I consider myself an American Muslim Pakistani. Whenever somebody sees me, I think their first inclination goes towards that I'm not American. I don't think it comes from anything bad. It just comes from seeing, the color of my skin, the headscarf, and there's an automatic assumption that I'm from somewhere else. So whenever somebody asks, where are you from, it usually means, well, what country are you from? That's not from here. But the thing is, though, right when I open my mouth, right when I start talking, they realize that I'm from here and that maybe this person and myself probably have the same kind of culture in common.
I identify as a Taiwanese American woman who lives in the Bay Area, and I also identify as a nutritionist and capoeirista and dancer and singer. My parents were a really big factor in helping me form my own identity. From very, very little, they always told me that, you're not Chinese, you're Taiwanese. It's really important for you to say that when people ask you, and then if they don't know where Taiwan is, it's your job to educate people. So growing up very much American and having a different culture at home and a different look was very interesting, because I had to kind of choose as I was growing up how much of each country I wanted to identify with.
We identify as kindred. We identify with the gender being spirit. We identify as one. We identify as many. Growing up with a Jamaican father, Choctaw and Southern Black mama, I had the opportunity to experience fluidity as a bicultural person who, on the surface, most people didn't perceive as bicultural. A Jamaican Black cultural experience is so different than a Southern Black cultural experience, and yet I was reduced to just one experience in the minds of a lot of people.
I identify as an American Muslim. Shortly after September 11th, I was actually flying to the Bay Area to visit my family, and it was just not a fun flight because it was absolutely packed. And so on the way back, I was with a friend, and I was like, if it's not a full flight, maybe we can move our seats. So we're at SFO. I'm checking in, and the lady's checking my ID, and I say, oh, by the way, is it going to be a full flight? And she does one of these. She's got my ID in her hand, and she kind of looks at that, looks at me, looks at that. Why? And at that moment, I suddenly became aware of, oh yeah, I'm one of the people that she's maybe afraid of. And that was literally the first time that it happened in my life, where I literally felt at that moment, I felt my identity being boiled down to this one thing.
I identify as Black, I identify as biracial, I identify as Jewish, I identify as gay. I kind of fancy myself like an old school traditional lesbian, tomboy. And I'm a mom, and I'm a gardener. In the 4th and 5th grade, I changed schools and was with more Black kids. And one of my friends, Peaches, to this day, just basically said to me, like, if you want to learn to be black and survive in the black community, you need to develop some black people skills. And so she came and taught me to dance and taught me sort of like various aspects of Bay Area black culture, and like came over to my house and sort of really sort of fancied herself a bridge for me to sort of develop my black identity alongside my Jewish identity.
I identify as African American. I guess in the summer before my 6th grade, we as a family moved over to San Carlos. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the history of San Carlos, but like a lot of peninsula towns, it was a sundown town where there might have been some reason for people of color to be there during the day, but at night you should certainly head out. I remember having an encounter with an older woman who said, you know, get off that bench isn't made for you to be on it, or something to that effect. And I remember asking a bus driver, you know, how do I find I think it was a 7F bus back to Britain Heights. He says, don't you mean the 7F back to East Palo Alto where your kind belongs? You know, and so I had a lot of interactions that were very much racial. And I think to some degree, I mean, I think I developed what I would call, maybe it's probably too strong a word, but sort of an oppositional identity. You know, so if I'm going to be black and you're going to see me as that, you know, I'm a black up.